I'm going to tell you where the female werewolf comes from, bitches. That's right. Arugula is the official lettuce of today's show. This is Wolfman Jack coming right at you, showing you how to be Wolfman Jane. Everybody heard of Wolfman Jane? She's basically Wolfman Jack with some boobies, all right? She's got some boobies and she's got a cave and she moans from the cave. And you might be thinking, wait a minute, that's very interesting. I know we got a lot to cover. Which is why we got to talk about this. But first, Toshitaka Suzuki has been torturing birds for 20 years. And he's a lover of birds. And this should tell you something about what love means, about what it's like to love something and how some people show that. Now, I don't want to make this about Toshitaka's fetish for bird torture, because it's more than that. This guy did more, but basically, first of all, college is great, and you guys should go to college. I think we should be going to college once we're in our 40s or so. Midlife crisis should be, now it's time to go to college. Now you go. Now all the passions that you've built up as your neocortex is growing is now ready to be put into a certain area. And I think only a few of us have the privilege of finding that area first. It's not a contest. It takes a while. Most of you don't even know yourself, the people that, including myself, but the people that we even find this niche early, I don't even think have found themselves. I think they found a niche. And those are different things, right? And that's okay. Ultimately, you should be, when you're in your 40s, just be, now I want to do the big thinking. And it really tells you that this is the opposite of, this is why so many people have disrespect for education, honestly, is because it really is more indoctrination. And it really is. It's more indoctrination. So Suzuki decided, I'm going to study the Japanese tit. This is in the story, guys. I didn't write this. I didn't pick this story because it has the word Japanese tit in it, but it does. He studied the Japanese tit, otherwise known as the pyrus minor. You guys don't know what pyrus minor means, but the Japanese tits, they're tiny birds, and they chirp. They do things, all right? Let's get your giggles out, waiting for all the giggles, waiting for everyone to get your giggles out so we can get on with the show. So, Toshitaka is studying the tit. He's for 2 decades. This guy spends his entire life listening to these birds and testing their language. And he discovered a lot of really interesting things. One of which is he found a syntax that existed. A syntax that would be used to stimulate the environment to advocate or advertise or send propaganda about the fact that there's a snake on the ground or that there's something over here that you should come. And the calls are very simple. And although it's unknown if there's a call for snake or if there's simply a call for a certain kind of danger elevation that we would call snake, but he's able to introduce false snakes. This is why I say he's kind of torturing birds. Introducing false snakes to the environment, gaslighting all these birds by recording all their calls, then playing them back to the calls, but at different times. And he started to notice that there's a meta language, a proto-language that exists. And the reason why I think this is so important is because if birds have a proto-language, our entire conceptual understanding of how language works, at least on a street level, the layman's understanding of how language works, which gets us into mythology, my main topic here, it's all wrong. Our idea that a soul crests into an advanced enough intelligence, and then after that intelligence spends a few million years bopping each over the head and dragging people into caves and first-personing themselves and or third-personing themselves into first person, saying, me caveman, me develop language, me have words, me never end sentence and prepositional phrase. And these things are part of the straw man Americana pie sort of thing that we call knowledge. And this is why it's called science, because science is your ability to know what other people know. It's not the ability to know the truth. That's the true etymology of the word. It's funny how scientists don't like to talk about that. Kind of like the same way the people that are way into the Bible don't like to talk about the fact that there's not a 10 commandment that says don't lie to yourself. But hey, I am digressing, and there's already a good chance of that. A good chance of tangents coming in here. So this guy discovers this syntax built into the birds. He's able to prove it by replaying the syntax. He's able to strip apart the syntax and actually realize it's a structured language. It has certain calls. What I'm interpreting to be a lower threat and a higher threat, but it's actually explained in the paper is much more diverse than that. And it could be true. I'm just saying that was my skeptical eye listening. But even the fact that my skeptical ear was hearing this lower threat, higher threat, it's still a syntax that could be playable. And more importantly, other birds, as you know, the mockingbird, tap into this language and use it to fuck with other birds. They gaslight each other. And isn't that what humans do? Camouflage. Some really retarded jackasses out there trying to tell you that there's no lies in nature, but literally camouflage is one of the most beautiful lies nature's ever invented. Your ego is a lie. Your entire cloisterment of your identity is supposed to be a lie on purpose. It's a kind of secret where you say who you are, but who you are may not necessarily be who you see yourself to be, that this is the opulence of a shell, and all of nature has these things because, as Africa teaches you, the Zaru are ones who have no life because they have no secrets. To lie is a form of identity. It's really profound this way. I'm getting way off track because the titmouse shows you language is much deeper. It shows you that it's also more vulnerable. I say vulnerable because once you have a species that lies, and I'm talking about basically anyone that has neuromelanin in their brain, in their spine. There's only a few of us that have neuromelanin. This dark black inky pigment that exists. It's a reach for me scientifically to say that anything with neuromelanin has the ability to lie, but I want you to consider that on a nervous system basis, the reason why your spine is full of neuromelanin, this absorption of signal chemical, this ability, this pigment to absorb shock, like electrical shock, and that the reason why you have all this neuromelanin in your spine and not every other creature does is here's my theory, okay? If you are stuck in a situation where you're pinned in a canyon between two mountain lions and you're a raccoon, you're going to probably not do so very well. But if you're more advanced and you have enough calories, you might have developed a neuromelanal architecture, which gives yourself the ability to ignore pain that's being registered into your mind. And one of the earliest roots, the early proto-intelligence, I'm talking about reptile, cold-blooded intelligence here, would be your ability to ignore your own spinal pain to escape danger. That you would notice that if you could change the flux of how much you could read each of your sensory organs, it might give you a quantum of possibilities, a quantum, a series of different reactions, an agency chain of chess moves that you would enact, not in necessarily movement, although it would show itself that way, but in fucking perception itself, your ability to perceive things. When you see it this way, and I hope that's a lot, I know, but if you start to look at interspecies self-denial as a form of self-defense, a way of finding escape mechanisms that otherwise you might seem impossible from a cold-blooded simpleton mind that simply read every single nervous impulse as pure truth. If you could lie to that, if you could doubt yourself about that, you would create this other thing. I think I'm going to sneeze. Hang on a second. I'm going to need to get something probably. So this here, think on that because this could get ugly. Wait a minute. I'm going to get something. I'll be right back. Hachu, aru, hachu, hachu, aru, aku, a Machu Picchu. Lakisu. The black goo is coming for you. C'est entendu. Bien constant. La poisson de fromage. De fromage. Le poisson. So, if your nervous system is able to lie to itself, it's able to like find an exit that it didn't see before. And this is a very advanced intelligence that doesn't require a brain. It doesn't require a sophisticated feedback loop that's checking stuff, because the neuromelanin could simply find a way to fluctuate. Just simply, let's boost this signal, let's numb this signal. Is there any other possibilities that are shown? Retinas register this. Your retinas are constantly calculating. While you sleep, your retinas are calculating. They're using the spatial hologram of your eyes, your retinal wall, to build equations. You're chasing the antelope in your dreams, and you're burning your retinal cones to do it. Your thinking system and your limbic system are the same. There's no difference. None. I'm going to say words. Staccato. Obrigado. Retardo. Yes. Retardo. Happy Friday to you all. Yeah, Machu Picchu Hachu. This is the sneeze. Royal sneeze of Peru. It's sacred spirit. Opens up. Things happen. They do. So, if we know that there's kind of like a meta-intelligence built into what we would consider lower conscious beings, which is a farce, really, we're starting to understand that the brain and consciousness really have nothing to do with each other. Because language is not like a virus. It's not like a separate attachment that's outside of you that you've been infected with because you're an advanced species. This is that layman's way of understanding language. Suzuki here, I think, is showing you that birds are algorithmically hackable. This hackability of language is an asynchronous connection. It's no different than saying if you're gonna open a website, you're going to get hacked. If you're going to open your IP, you're going to go into your DHCP settings, and you're going to go under advanced, and you're going to click on firewall routing, and then you're going to route your specific IP so it can reach the outside world because you want to play a game. Yeah. And now you're getting hacked because you've got this tiny little hole and people can come up and drop stink bombs in there. And this is life, man. That's what it's like being alive. Everything's hacked. Hackable is a symptom of value. And if you want to never be hacked, you just need to never have value. You need to roll around in some poopy. You need to hang out by the side of the road, like Ezekiel, You need to eat poopy when people walk by. You got to wait for them to walk by, then you eat the poopy. Then they're like, why are you eating poopy? And he's like, because God said that if I was good, I could just eat cow poopy. But I have to make you watch me because it's kind of a thing that if you watch me eat poo, then we invent 2 girls in 1 cup in 3,000 years. And God said that we have to have 2 girls in 1 cup in order to bring a higher kind of civilization because we're doing the great work. And hey, you want to eat this cow pie with me? And you're like, no, why are you cooking it? It's like, it tastes better when it's warm. And you're just like, you're sick. He's like, yeah, I know. That's why I'm here. Got neuromelanin. It's lying to myself. It's told me I should cook cow poopy by the side of the road and eat it. If you guys don't know this is like all true stories out of the Bible, you need to read your Bible. You need to read your Bible. Some of you are not eating enough cow poop, and it shows. It's all over your face. Not the cow poop, but the fact that you're not cooking it. So, James, get back to the show. God, you're right. There's so much to cover. This is such a rich show. It really is. I swear. So if birds have this algorithmic ability to be hacked, to have their language. By the way, if you could just read my articles, you don't have to put up with all this. If you're just like, James, you're not downloading the information fast enough. All you got to do is just read the articles. You're just like, God, I don't want to fucking read. Are you fucking, what are we in 1870? Oh, Priscilla, I write you on such an occasion to express my deepest gratitude for your latest letter in which you imparted upon me how wonderful it is that you live in the countryside. It's like, yeah, who wants to do that? Who wants to? I don't know. I'm just glad Ginger's laughing. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching James True. So, if birds can lie, birds have language, you can hack the language. There's no ifs. This is what happens. If you could do all these things, then it means we could start to understand the differences in how humans think, especially early Greek. We've discussed this before. I was blown away. First of all, let me just tell you this real quick. Snake is one of those. Actually, I already told you snake. I don't have to tell you that. This is great. Way to go, James. You're already doing this. See, you're not totally off track. Notice that when you start to think about ancient Greek, don't get bored here. I swear this will just take a sec. But when you start to think about ancient Greek, you hear words and you're just like, I don't want to do this anymore. But there's a stress in the foot of the Greek term. The technical word, iambic, trochee, spondy, pyrrhic, don't worry. But the point is that you're looking at where are you putting the stress, right? Twinkle, twinkle, that's a iambic. Twinkle, twinkle, that's a trochee. It's very different, isn't it? But it's not so different when you think about words like below, or flower, see? Below is iambic. Flower is trochee. All I need you to see is the music. I don't need you to remember any of these words. I need you to see that there's a tonal input, a ba-ba, 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 ba-ba. And that a simpler civilization, a civilization that did not have everyone's ego fully online, needed a simpler form of communication. Do you remember AM radio? Some of you may have a radio in your cars. Some of you can switch it to AM, and the first thing you notice is, God, why does the audio quality suck? And it sucks because it's a lower vibration, because we did not have the technology, the complexity to understand FM. High frequency modulation was too much for our simple radio transistor brains. And we would carry around radios that you would fit in your pocket if your pockets were big enough. And it's about this thick. It's about the size of a small novel. And you had knobs and dials on it. And you could switch the bands and you could interpret different frequencies. But a lot of times those radios were just AM. They were cheaper. They had less copper coil. They didn't require such a long difference. All radios basically is just a really long piece of copper, and you're just simply crimping the ends of the copper, and the length of the copper that you crimp is going to determine the signal that you hear, and that your attitude and your posture works the same way. Are you seeing success? Is my channel growing? Is my channel going to be okay? Are we going to be able to do the show this year? And so I tune my spine as best I can to that frequency where I can see that message. And I wait for something to tell me this is going to happen. Because if something comes, I will keep listening. It will be easier to keep listening because I will know I'm on the right channel. And so all it takes is like one of you joining Patreon, for example. And that this bird augury works the same way. Early communication works the same way. I want you to think about how early man, before he was in school, before he was taught language, he was listening to birds. And the birds had something to say. The birds would tell him when snake was near. The birds would tell him when it was going to rain. The birds gave him an input into an environment that otherwise he wouldn't see, which means that man was entrained by birds. I would argue that birds spoke before man did because birds came first. They had millions of years to practice the algorithm of hacking each other, because truly that's what birds are doing. When a bird sees a snake, it's saying, I have a conceptual idea that this is a snake. I have a conceptual idea that this is a snake. I have a conceptual idea that this is a snake and that this is a bird call. I swear to you, this is what it means. And Suzuki tells you that other birds come and they see the conceptual idea And they will either intune, entrain, agree. They will help propagate that signal. They will say, hey, I like the cut of your signal. I have a conceptual idea of a snake. 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 And now you have three birds that have triangulated a fucking reality. And it doesn't exist before this. The tree is not there. It's not there until you're here. You're listening. You make it so. You bring it into the world the same way the birds do. They are formulating and triangulating what reality is. And they're confirming it. This is machine language equation. This is a fucking algorithm solving itself. Is this true? And when you think about how this shaped early Greek mind, it shows up because you have all these rules. There are rules about speaking in Greek. You can't rush in there with Hemingway paragraphs and expect people to be moved. It's not going to happen. You have to be entrained inside the language of hearing, of listening. And there has to be a kind of addicting propagation. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. How I wonder what you are. This is an entrainment. This is I'm not just inserting the word twing. I'm saying something else is coming. And when I reaffirm it, I'm actually giving your brain some juice. This is the same as a CB call that says, Breaker 19, is anybody out there? You can't keep talking. You have to wait for someone to say, Roger that, this is Disco Biscuit. And that is the confirmation you need to continue. And I'm telling you that twinkle is the same thing. Iambic is the same thing. That early Greek meter required you to be on board. And there's only certain points where the train can stop for you to climb on. And that most of the journey early on is going to be telling people, hey, it's a train. Please don't stick your hands out the window. Please don't. Next stop is this. It's a lot of repetition. It's a lot of easily predictable tones that you and I might find boring today, but back then became absolutely necessary for communication. Why? Because these fuckers were bird brains. The early Greek were bird brains, and they learned to speak through birds. Anna D just told a joke. I will repeat the joke. Da dit da dit da da dit da. That's hilarious. It's kind of creepy. But all jokes have this kind of like thing to it. This kind of meter is used as a form of intoxication. Shakespeare used this trochaic meter in supernatural voices, like the witches in Macbeth. Double toil and trouble. This is a different feeling, this trochee, than something more comfortable and predictable, like Twinkle Twinkle. So Suzuki, in my mind, is just proving all this to you. He doesn't actually mention the ancient Greek part, but I think it's impossible to ignore. And one of we'll just do a proof. This is the hymn to Aphrodite spoken by Professor Stephen Dates. And he's done as best he can to academically approach what this would sound like. This is not about, does it sound good? This is about, is this what it sounded like? I think you're going to be able to hear this. It's going to take a sec to start. Yeah, you should be able to hear this. So why does it sound this way? Is it beautiful? Some of you are just going to be contrarian and be like, yeah, it is. It's so beautiful. And that's fine. I'm not here to argue that. But I think on average, most people would not really find that necessarily digestible. You'd actually find it much harder to understand. Yeah, it's in Greek, but I think even beyond that, the tonal register that's coming in does not offer enough diversity where you find yourself having to lean in and really try and hear what the fuck is he saying. I don't mean the letters. I'm talking about what is he saying. The intonations are all a head tone. His entire register chamber of speaking is completely up in the nasal cavity. This is what's called head tone, right? It's not diaphragm. These are Greeks walking around naked. You think that it'd be all genital sounds. It'd be all like, but it's not. It's bird sounds. It's bird tones, my friends. And I think when you mesh Suzuki's work with what ancient Greek sounded like, you're looking at the early Greek psyche, this bicameral mind, this subject that we've been discussing a lot here lately, this idea that the early psyche didn't have enough connections in the corpus callosum. The brow of your third eye, if you were to chop your brain in half, the brow of your third eye is that corpus callosum, and that all the intricate connections take thousands, I'm going to say 6,000 years to develop. And then until those develops, you're not a purely ripe human yet. Your cantaloupe is not ripe yet. You need other civilization to open up new neural pathways. These are all the new ideas you see on social media. It's the wonderful live streams you run around on YouTube that you could support by joining Patreon or subscribing or liking or sharing right now, that open these corpus callosum and start to create a self which makes it harder for you to enter into the wolf. If we learn to speak through birds, it's a little bit easier to start to understand that we emerged from a more animalistic consciousness. And last time we discussed a very important Roman word, Versipellis. Versi is in to be diverse, the ability to diversify. There's that root right there. And then pellis, skin. The diverse skinner, right? The Leonard Skinner, the turner of skin. Versipellis, the turner of skin, the skin turner. This you and I know as Werewolf. You're gonna have to watch the last live stream to catch up on the werewolf part, but it's important because it connects here. This is the perfect intersection for it. Watch how these things converge, because I want you to remember that in ancient Greece there was an issue of gluttony. You would go to a banquet, and if the food was so good, or the drink was so good, or the spirits were so good that a few of your house guests wouldn't make it home, they would die. They would either drink too much, they would eat too much, they would suffer a horrible death because they could not stop. The only remnant we have of that is this word called gluttony, and it's so pushed to the side because most of us have sort of mastered this, although I would say more of us haven't. And one of the ways that we do not master this is because we slip into Versipellis. You and I, skin turn, when we enter into certain addictions. These are moments where you sort of slip and lose consciousness. I'm talking about conscious awareness of yourself, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing. When you were pursuing a form of art, you were Versipellis. Let me rephrase that. If you were pursuing art as a true artist, you were Versipellis. You were a skin turner. You're losing your identity. You're completely becoming the flow of the activity that's before you. So Versipellis is only dangerous before we learn to master it. And it was dangerous in ancient Greece. It was so dangerous that we had to have laws that tried to stop ourselves in some way. But more importantly, we had festivals because there was no way psychologically we could hold it together. That you're looking at people that are trying to hold an ego through an entire month and they just can't make it. And that something as simple, as the waxing of the moon causes enough of a rift in society where it allows you to parasympathetically just let go of yourself And you would enter into this animalistic Versipellis type state because your psyche frankly needed it to survive. You needed this ability to cleanse, to release, to let go of tension. Very similar, I would say, to how modern culture might approach, say, masturbation as a form of stress relief. I'm just saying that those two things are kind of there, but I think in earlier times, that kind of relief required a deeper psychological emergence into an animalistic spirit. This is why we celebrated Bacchus, because Bacchus was a kind of church. Bacchus, the god of wine, meaning that the moment you become drunk, you become Versipellis, Bacchus. You become this turner, the skin that is turned Bacchus. You become this living creature that Bacchus embodies. Same with Mars. Yeah. Same with Jupiter. The early Greek mind, the early Roman mind needed the planets, the luminaries, to attach agency to them. There is an agency in me called Jupiter. And before Zeus steps forward at Mount Olympus inside your cranium and controls all the cranial nerves, that the 12 sacred cranial nerves, which really break down to 9 if you consider the trigeminal, that these 12 sacred cranial nerves are 9 planets, are simply manifestations of the psyche that we decide to put in charge during certain times because our ego is not fully formed, that Zeus is still a baby. The overarching ego itself is still too weak to hold command 24/7. And that this makes sense because you have your autonomic breathing system. You have this entire subconscious that no matter what you do, it's going to always remember, hey guys, we got to breathe. We got to breathe. We got to breathe. We got to breathe. And it doesn't care who's captain. It doesn't even know that there's a bridge. It's Scotty in the engine room. It gets called sometimes. But its entire life is focused on that warp core, the breath. And this is an agency. And that before your ego forms, that agency might be the esophageal nature of digestion itself, would have more say or more power over where your creature goes than you do. Your esophagus is full of neurons. Your esophagus is its own intelligence. If you really want to understand yourself, you may want to look at your stomach and your esophagus and your intestines as sort of their own body, their own entity, kind of like a manatee. And you've slapped on a bunch of mud, a bunch of clay on top of this manatee, and you put a saddle on it. And in this saddle is built out of ribs, and these rib cages wrap around this manatee, and you've given this manatee a diving suit. And this diving suit has lungs, and it's got a gallbladder. It has the ability of the trachea to cut things off and to take in water or then to take in drink. And that this incredibly sophisticated system is an intelligence that doesn't fucking require you knowing, I'm John Jacob, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't need that. It's autonomous. And 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 500 BC ago, you were looking at a kind of psyche that did not have the same kind of power set. If you remember that during the dawn of Jesus really is the dawn of the true I am, the 24/7 I am, the living, breathing ego that's able to survive all the time and is able to alchemize their own shame. They don't have to turn into a wolf. They don't have to go join ICE. They don't have to tell themselves that they're saving the country while they wander off to Iraq and burn down oil fields. It's a different psyche, and we're still not online because it takes a while. It takes a while because there's a lot of work. It's a lot of work because there's a lot of cells in your body, and cellular hallucination requires a lot of congruence. That's what we're doing right now. That's what we're doing right now. Whales don't have to wake up and pay bills. I think they do, Nick. They probably do. I would even argue that all the prawn economies that we have, all the economy of scale that we have, the fact that most of us volunteer to give 40% of our power instantly to a higher power itself is not necessarily a flaw of the powerful. It's more of a flaw of us. And our just sense of we're not ready to handle these things yet. And thank God there's a larger predator above us because we need to grow here. And honestly, what's going to stoke the most growth is going to be the vitriol from that fucking predator. See, nature's thought of all this. Nature's thought of all of this. And you can tell yourself this shit's broken as much as you want. But that's just you coping with you, man. It's really not really a part of what's happening on a larger scale, I think. And I think Suzuki shows you this because ultimately he's showing you what is it a deeper intelligence. So if we were more animalistic, what was life really like then? And I think the best way to understand this is to enter the Sibyl. The Sibyl. Sibyl. It's probably the Sibyl. One of the more famous stories of the Sibyl goes like this. The Cumaean Sibyl was the eldest of crones. She traveled for miles bearing a burden of books to the king upon the Palatine. I wrote it all down, she told him. Every word, every vision. It's all here in these books. Your future, my king, is larger than most. The king was amused until she named her price. The sum for the books was so outrageous the court spat wine. Unmoved by the laughter, the Sibyl stepped to the fire and cast 3 of the books into the flames. The room fell silent as the king watched his own prophecy burn. She offered him what remained for the same price. He called her mad for doing it. Without hesitation, she consigned 3 more books to the fire. Only 3 remained, he said. The king's augurs chirped urgently in his ear until he brushed them aside. At last, begrudgingly, he agreed. The crone disappeared and was never seen again. The remaining volumes were gathered and sealed into royal custody, where they became the Sibylline books, which is truly the cornerstone of Rome, as you'll find out later. So this Sibyl was quite an interesting character. She had enough pull, enough charm, enough power to pull an audience with the king. Not only that, she understood how the spirit of society worked then. She understood. See, the augurs were telling the king, dude, if you don't buy these books, this is just going to be bad. There's no way around this. He's showing the king how much power he doesn't have because of what the people believe. And the people watching his own prophecy burn up means they get to say what's in it. They get to guess, well, I bet it said this. And clearly, if he burned his own prophecy, then he was rejecting what Apollo would tell him. It would be a lot of speak like this. And the king is told by his augurs, realizing, fuck, I have no choice. I have to buy these things. That bitch conned me, is what he'd say. Something interesting about this king, he's Supermax is his name. He's a real king around 500 BC. This is before Romulus. This is before Rome is Rome. This is why I set it in Palatine Hill, to give you an idea that this is just the hill of Rome. Just one of the 7 hills, in fact. It's basically a whorehouse at this point. Just a warlord pimp running a whorehouse on top of a hill. And this old crone walks in and sells him books. He has no choice, though, because he knows how the land works. See, a Sibyl was shaped by the land. The land was sort of like a conch shell. Different areas, whether it be groves or caves or brooks even, would have these little spots, these little nooks, these little crannies. Crannies where crones can moan. The Sibyl was founded in a place. She rooted. It was almost always geographical. So the Sibyl is attached to the land because she is the siren of that place. And being in that place for years and years, she attracts attention. So what would cause that to be attention? Why would a woman in a cave make people gather around? And if you think about this is quite natural. A lot of early cultures separate themselves during menstruation. A lot of cultures separate themselves during childbirth. A lot of cultures separate themselves during mourning. And you have this creature, the woman, who for years and years we needed laws passed that said she couldn't get too hysterical when she was mourning her husband. I'm just saying, these were the rules. Just like men would come berserk, so too would women have these Versipellis, these states of animism. I'm telling you that the Sibyl was the early werewolf, the female werewolf. That just as the man, as we discussed last time, would pee in a circle around his clothes and then run out and probably murder the innkeeper to have sex with his beautiful wife, and then only to return and find himself human again, having no conscious recollection of what happened, only a story about a wolf, that the Sibyl would be the same. It's the same thing. And whether she's in the cave moaning because she's menstruating, whether she's in the cave moaning because she's giving birth, or whether she's in the cave moaning because she gave birth and it died, you could picture in all those situations curious young men, young boys, gathering outside, listening to this bugle of the land play a sound of the Sibyl moaning from inside. This would become an oracle. It would be a gathering place, a sort of corner quick stop. Commerce would take place. Socialization would take place. People would gather outside this cave as long as the songs kept. And as anyone entering the cave, the songs would cease. So you could see how it would be quite a natural sort of occurrence where this Sibyl shell, this little Sibyl hole, would naturally protect itself. And over time, these Sibyl holes would grow, and that they would be caramelized into temples. And these temples would be incorporated into something like the Oracle of Delphi that you see today. And that's exactly what happened. And that the Sibyls that existed then pre-Rome had more flammability. They were much more combustible. And if you were a king, you would travel to the most popular Sibyl you could find to hear her fate, because that fate that she gave you would be power when others hear her prophecy too. This is why you have to buy her books. So even if you don't believe in this, say you're Alexander, let's just say Alexander doesn't believe, maybe he doesn't. He goes to the oracle anyway because he doesn't have a choice. Sibyl had free reign of her tongue to say whatever she wanted. In fact, the Sibyl was only good when she could say those things. She was horrible otherwise. The image invoked is really, really characterized well, I think, in this painting. This is Aeneas and the Sibyl. This is attributed to John Martin, but people think that maybe he didn't actually paint it. But if you look at the image, you at first you can't even tell which is the outside of the cave and which is the inside of the cave, right? And you see inside this Kronos type figure, these underworld type figures. You've got the odd serpent burning with fire out of his mouth. You have the remnants of a broken cross. You have the tortured souls of the underworld struggling to accept the light. And then you have this rich king who's come in to consult this ghostly woman hiding herself under a veil, bequeathing some sort of prophecy to him. There's nothing about this that's stable. There's nothing about this image that paints the idea that these were like good things. It's a very volatile kind of thing. It's a very volatile kind of place to live in and to have a relationship with your own intuition. And I think ultimately this became a problem. But in the early time, I think that you would realize this would be the only way a Sibyl would survive. You need the propaganda, the salaciousness of this cave, having the stories that would spread the most. That, think about it, the first weird thing that happens at this cave is free advertisement. And that anyone approaching this Sibyl who's been brought for hundreds of miles by a story is charging that cave before they even get there. So it becomes its own battery. It becomes its own power center. It becomes its own city of Un. That's a really obscure term. Sorry, you'd have to be watching me for a while to understand that. But these beacons of light that would attract the consciousness of people that are wanting to survive, and that you, the budding consciousness, would utilize, you would tap into the belief of the Sibyl and everyone else who believed in the Sibyl to have a better season. Kind of like me right now with Patreon in 2026. Things are really low right now. I don't know if we're going to be able to do 2026. I don't know. And I'm telling you this story because it's true, because it's salacious enough and it's sounding enough that you will go out back to your homeland and talk about this creature that you found on this channel too. Propaganda is a form of truth, because the propaganda itself, at least back then, was absolutely necessary for the power to survive, that you needed this. Heraclitus, one of the first mentions in the written word of the Sibyl, says, "The Sibyl was with raving mouth utters things mirthless, unadorned, unperfumed. Her voice carries through 1,000 years." This is one of my favorites. Plato says, "The prophetess at Delphi and the priestesses at Dodona, when they were mad, did many great things for Hellas, both in public and private life, but when they were in their senses, few or none." So he's saying, you do not want to see these people when they're rational, when they're political. The only magic that comes out of this kind of technology is when it's unbridled, when it's in its animalistic state. And the only way you could enter true Versipellis spirit in that time would be to live in a world without consequences. This is the psyche of the werewolf, isn't it? There are no consequences. They're not small consequences and big consequences, Jerry. There are no consequences. We are werewolves now. It's just that simple, right? This is the kind of state that you would need to enter into an intuitive spirit, one in which there are no consequences. If you are trying to give advice as a Sibyl to a king, and you know that this king's advice could either make you or break you, you are not going to be a good Sibyl. You have to find a way to break through your own sense of survival and just deliver what you think is the essential truth. That's really what this show is now. It's like, look, let me just go down telling you about the Sibyl if that's how it has to be. If this channel's not meant to stay up, for example, it's at least we'll go down with this, because this stuff's important. And I hope that whoever will take over will cover this stuff and will give you this kind of exposure, because this stuff's important, because it helps you understand you. The Cumaean Sibyl chants dread enigmas, booms from the cavern, wrapping truth in darkness. This is Virgil. This is another painting. It's again just showing you this menacing kind of feeling. This was not like a happy thing. Aeneas and the Cumaean Sibyl, that's the famous one, painted by Francois Perrier. This alms that they're burning out front is an important term, because it ends up being the thing that actually killed Sibyl. That Sibyl had to be ended because she had too much power. In the past, you had a prophetic seership. And these seers could be loosely categorized into the Sibyl, the Mantis, the prophetess, and the chresmologos. So the Sibyl, as you know, is the female order. It's always female, by the way, for Sibyl. She's female, she's spontaneous, she's location rooted, right? She's rooted in the soil, the cave, their local brewery, like a craft brewery, but a craft oracle. And most importantly, she's unsanctioned. This is what made her so dangerous. She was unsanctioned. She could pop up off the social media of the time just like that. Mantis was a seer too. It could be male, female, mostly male, but it was a trained interpreter of signs. Think about this. This is not really prophecy. When you start to interpret signs, you're no longer asking a hysterical woman in a cave to tell you your future. You're actually saying, will I grow crops this year? Yes or no? Will my wife give birth to a son? Will we win this battle at blah, blah, blah? Should I invade? All these are questions that you would ask. And I want you to notice just how much power is in that framing. That when you start to build a mantis, you now have a framing. And when you have a framing or a scaffold wrapped around the Sibyl, you get to control what she says. You do. You're turning her into a magic 8-ball. You're turning her into a yes, no, maybe, could be, all signs point to maybe, ask again later. All those answers. And you end up softening the edges of the Sibyl. And believe it or not, this softening of the edges allowed her to survive because the larger format seekers of seerships found these kinds of seers more acceptable, more tenable. They came with more insurance. So the Sibyl really was kind of choked out by the Mantis. But they still had that power. You'll see once we get into the devotees just how much this changes. The prophetess, these are, again, sort of another entrainment above this, official oracle spokesperson, a temple authorized mediator. This would be where the Oracle of Delphi would go. She started out probably as a Sibyl. We don't know the exact origin, but that's probably it. As I've told you before, Omphalos, the navel of the world, was associated with Delphi because I personally think because that navel is the lingam. The lingam would only have been popular the same way the Sibyl would have only been popular because the lingam is basically just a giant hump rock. And then a hump rock would eventually lead to a whorehouse. A whorehouse would lead to a really big civilization. That civilization would lead to a holy temple of virgins. It's the same words, guys. It's the same thing. All you've done is PG-13 it so your kids can come. And then when they get older, they can come again. It's sickening. Get your mind out of the gutter. So these prophetic seers were solely industrialized, and I think you see it most because ultimately the prophetic seers became cultic devotees. Flamen sounds like a great word because it's these are the flames. These are the burns. The flamen is the priest bound to a god through taboo and ritual duty. Why flamen? Because they would burn things for you. Comes back to that. This painting. And a flamen was no longer giving you prophecy now. A flamen was simply co-signing, notarizing your sacrifice. It was an official witness that was there to give you the confidence that that you've been seen. And so something very interesting happened. The Sibyl turned into the flamen and the vestal. We're going to get to a show called Romulus, the First Pimp of Rome, and you'll a lot of this will make more sense, but in order to have a good show today, the Vestal was the Sibyl placed into a round building. The Vestal virgins were housed in a temple. This is probably one of the first buildings, honestly, that was built in Rome. The successor of Romulus put this together, and I think ultimately he just used all the whores that Romulus had gathered and said, we gotta lock this shit down. And he built a round room for them. It's very important. It's a round room, and this round room will always have fire inside of it. And that this fire would be tended by the virgins. He took the Sibyls and he put them in charge of firewood. And he told them that if this fire goes out, you guys die. Our entire village dies if you just extinguish this flame. This is if you don't stay hot. If this doesn't stay hot, if the crucible of this whorehouse, of this hill, does not stay hot, if you virgins don't tend to this all the time, we're going to die. And it turned the Sibyl into a kind of slave labor. It pimpified the Sibyl. And she became a Vestal virgin, and you know what? The Vestal virgins gave no prophecy. When I first heard Vestal virgins, I imagined they probably gave prophecy, and they didn't. No. They were supposed to be virgins. They were supposed to be cloistered. They weren't supposed to go to a cave and moan. Guys, they weren't allowed to moan. They were surrounded with luxury, bitches. They got all the marble, they got all the dates. They got all the figs they could eat. They're they're cloistered in the most beautiful part of the city, placed in the shiniest temple they've ever seen. The wood that they have is sacred. The The grass they walk on is sacred. The beds that they sleep on is sacred. The chambers they have are sacred. This is social media before social media was born. And all that fame turned the Sibyl. It turned her into clay. It turned her into this other creature that really, really didn't have say anymore. It turned her into something that was no longer emotionally attached to the land, but instead was the very foundation for the bureaucracy that would remain. The Vestal gives no prophecy. And Rome is a place where you come to seek the augur, to have someone stare at a window and watch for birds, and to count how many birds appeared within a certain window, and that number itself could be interpreted by you and the augur as meaning a certain thing. This is the stamping out of the intuition. This is the standardization of the intuition. Your intuition needs to have its papers verified, is what this means. And when you look at the corpus callosum, when you look at the brow of the eye of Horus, the third eye, that section, it's being built in real time as fast as it can. And when the ego comes online, it starts to step on the intuition, because you cannot give a bitch in a cave a megaphone. You don't want to do that. Your body's going to do a lot of things that you may not feel are very Zeusian. And this truly is the struggle of the psyche. The temptations that lead us to invent the idea of chopping off the end of our penis is truly the manifestation of how do I yoke, how do I bring in the reins of my Sibyl, of my werewolf that's screaming inside me, see? It's just such a big deal, I think, to understand the true nature of where we've been, how we got here, all that stuff. All these things are leading up to, believe it or not, the Romulus, the first pimp of Rome, finally gets us into Gilgamesh. I've not forgotten Gilgamesh, but believe it or not, all this stuff is necessary steps to get us there, because I'm telling you, if this show makes it to where we get to talk about Gilgamesh, you're going to be blown away by how crucially, psychologically, the story of Gilgamesh is to explaining who the fuck we are, how the fuck we got here, and why we remember these things. It'll be a really fun ride. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Let me know what you think in the comments. Be really appreciated if you would consider sharing this episode, subscribing if you're not, hitting thumbs up. Comments really help a lot too. Of course, if you really want to help, if you really just want to see this show keep happening, you could just join Patreon. Just give me a year, give me 6 months, give me a few months, set your budget. You can put any amount you want in there. There's a lot of perks that come with them. I'd be happy to turn you on to those things. Really appreciate you. Thank you so much for watching James True. Yeah, Hungry Like the Wolf, Matzo Ball. That'll be the next episode there. So appreciate it. Thank you so much.
The sun.